بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
Welcome to the first episode of the fourth season, $1 Trillion Problem of the fourth podcast. I'm Ali Wazir.
I'm Ibrahim Ali.
And I'm Talha Muhammad.
And you can help us grow by giving us a follow on Instagram at thefourth.productions and Twitter at thefourth_prod, PROD. So thank you all for joining us again for another season of the fourth podcast.
We're very excited to announce that this season we'll be talking about campus life.
So, I'm very excited as well, Ibrahim, because we all go to college over here.
Oh, really? Oh, man. That's crazy.
And I think a lot of our listeners are in college as well. So, this is very relevant, and I'm glad we're finally getting to discuss this, because we've touched on it before, but now it's nice to have a full season for it.
Because we're students, that's why.
Because I don't like to talk about things I don't know about, you know? I feel kind of dumb. I'm going to set this kind of tone for both of you guys. I saw a healthy little infographic the other day with sources. It says since 1978, adjusted for inflation, the cost of college tuition has increased by 1,120%. Meanwhile, the pay of typical workers rose by just 10% in this time frame, and minimum wage workers actually fell by 5.5%. Again, adjusted for inflation. As we always do with episode 1, we'd like to hit the topic. We'd like to view this theme of ours through the lens of current affairs. And living in America, this is really relevant to us right now. The rising cost of tuition and the increase that also has on student loans. So,
I mean, so we see like a lot of candidates. Like right now, we're in the middle of the Democratic primary, right? Mm-hmm. So we see a lot of candidates that are promising a whole bunch of solutions to the student debt crisis. Some people are saying that they're going to make college affordable. Some people are saying that they're going to make college free and tuition free and then cancel all student debt. Mm-hmm. And some people are saying that it's not feasible to cancel student debt. We'll try to make college cheaper for other people to come and to go in the future. Mm. And I think the only solution to this problem that we have is like radical change. Like, we need to cancel all student debt, and we need to make public college and tuition free.
Well, I think that's a pretty radical idea. I don't know how we can actually implement that. But as you guys both
Who's
mentioned,
gonna pay for it?
Okay,
come
so,
on. No. You were saying something.
The larger problem really has to do with just the student loan crisis as a whole. Like, why have college costs gone up so high? Tuition, board, mandatory fees, your books, and this rate has just been increasing exponentially over time. And as you mentioned, Tala, that the rates for wages have only been increasing a minimal 5-10%. So how do we as Americans go about changing that? And how do we go about adjusting the inflation rates as well, as they've just been increasingly going up for the past few decades? Now, I know you have a difference in regards to like public education and also private education when it comes to colleges, and actually the tuition and fees drastically change based on that. Mm-hmm. However, when it comes to just paying out like thousands and thousands of dollars for the average American family, that's not feasible.
Right.
And I believe it's about 2/3 of jobs or jobs in the workplace require some form of a college degree, right? Mm-hmm. So you're already putting an individual through the stress and struggle of school, in addition to the 40 to 50 grand a year it may cost if you're going to, like, let's say a big state school, right? Paying board, tuition, room, the mandatory fees and books. But then also you're causing, mental health issues, just with the mental toll it takes, knowing you've got 500 grand in debt coming straight out, right?
Yeah, mm-hmm.
So that's just, the unfortunate cycle that's going on for the last few decades.
Yeah, I mean, I think this problem is mainly perpetuated by people who own these colleges and people who profit off of these people that are in debt, that put themselves under tremendous stress to go to these schools and whatnot. So, so I know Bernie, right? He always says this, and he makes a good point. When in 2008, during the housing crisis, right? Why were the people who ruined the economy for people for like a decade? They crashed the entire economic system of the United States. How come they got to get a bailout from the United States government, and then people who are taking on everyday common people were taking on massive amounts of debt, so they can work to pay off that debt? Why can't these guys? Why can't they be bailed out?
There's some form of a loan forgiveness.
I think, so you mentioned the student loan crisis. The title of this season as well, $1 Trillion Problem, is taken from a book by Eric and Joel Best, in which they discuss the student loan crisis in depth. And what's really interesting is that despite student loans being created initially in the 50s with the purpose of helping pay for college easier, what ended up happening really is that it just became a business in and of itself, because obviously in a capitalist society it's the interest that matters so much. So if you can have interest on a loan, then that becomes a place for people to profit from, actually. Mm-hmm. And what's obvious about this is that student loans are there's both a public option and a private option in the United States, right? But in April of last year, the current administration started commissioning private consultants to estimate the value of the public student loan portfolio in order to start selling it to private loan companies. So we can see that really this is becoming a business in and of itself. And especially with the rise of for-profit colleges like the University of Phoenix, mm-hmm. especially in the age of internet colleges. I don't know what you call them exactly, but like online, online universities. It's become very feasible to make a business model out of actually putting students in debt, mm-hmm. which is a big problem in and of itself. It doesn't make life easier for anybody. But what's really important to analyze right now is exactly how we got to this place in time, mm-hmm. and what can be done through the lens of current affairs to kind of put an end to this, really. And obviously, a lot of other countries, this is a problem that's pretty specific to America, because a lot of other countries have free tuition, such as, especially for their own citizens. Some countries even give stipends to their citizens for going to college, actually. They haven't really created a pathway for a business model to be created from profiting off the debt of students. And so this is a uniquely American problem that I feel is really pertinent for us to discuss.
Mm-hmm. For sure. I mean, you make a valid point there. The entire concept of how we have to go to college so we can make money and so we can pay off the loans that we took to go to college. Like it's such a I don't know how to say it, but it's such an archaic concept, right? Mm-hmm. Because it kind of doesn't make any sense. It's like one thing cancels out the other thing. Like, how can you go to college so you can make money? We have to take out money to go to college in the first place. Mm-hmm. So like it's such a backwards concept in and of itself.
So just to establish the history of the student loan issue, you have to understand the entire system was built in the 60s, the 1960s, with the greater belief that everyone deserved a higher education and that it's a safe and worthy investment for both society at large and also for like the individual going to college. Mm-hmm. And around the first time people were going to college was actually after World War II. You had the baby boomer generation, right?
Yeah.
So these are individuals coming back from war.
If I can cut you off for a quick second, I think that's when college became much more of an expectation, mm-hmm. right? Because obviously colleges, like the Ivy League schools, have existed since the beginning of America.
Yeah, of course.
But this is when it became a new idea was born that everybody has the right to go to college. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So everyone in society should obtain a higher degree of education to obtain a better lifestyle. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Continue.
No, you're absolutely correct. Yeah, you did have like Ivy Leagues like Yale and Harvard that existed for years.
Since
before.
like I think the 1600s even.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, as I was saying, like the American economy, like you want the economy needed to grow, and one of the best ways to grow an economy was to have more educated individuals, to go into better workforces, and therefore create more innovative ideas, right? Which is what has led to, for example, like the internet boom in 2000s, right? You got highly intellectually capable people that went in and created new ideas for the world, and therefore the economy soared. So that was just the idea behind the federal loan program in the 60s, was to be able to give more money to people so they could go out and obtain better jobs. The only issue occurs when you start having too many people that go into the system, and the money is originally given, whether it be 30 grand, 40 grand through federal loans, and it's not pushed into, or it's not looking at the long-term issues that may occur. So as that's what we're seeing now, is a program that began in the 60s, and now 50 years later, 60 years later, we're now seeing over 1,400 students a day default on their student loans. So you've had individuals that they simply can't pay it. How are they supposed to pay when they're still working 9 to 5 jobs that perhaps
They're paying less and less every single year.
Yeah. So I think that's just a little background history about it. It's that the intention was great by all means. It's just there was no look at the long-term issues and problems that we develop.
Another interesting conundrum, I guess, that I've encountered is that how Bernie says to cancel all student debt. So
Yes.
what about the people who worked hard, saved up, made sacrifices, and paid off their student debt, and like they sacrificed for years. Like, what do we do with those people? Like, do we if you're gonna pay off the student debt of people, right? What about the people who've already paid it off? Like, do they get a tax break? What do you guys think about that?
I think we simply pat them on the back and send them on their way.
Hey, so when are you running for president?
That's actually a very good point you bring. I honestly, I'm not entirely sure, and I think America's still trying to grapple with that idea as a whole, and that's why it's such a big issue within this American presidential race.
So on one hand, I think you see people saying like, oh, in that case, the polio vaccine should never have been spread around, because what about the people who died from polio before that? What do we do about them? But I'm not trying to just like laugh.
Being dead is a very permanent state.
Yeah, but I understand the concerns of people who have already paid off their student debt, right? They say, well, we managed our money well. We sacrificed a lot after graduating college in our 20s and 30s. And we took a lot of care to make sure that we were being financially responsible. And honestly, I'm not elected to anything. I'm in no public office. But I do think that...
excuse me, aren't you the...
Please.
Oh, wait.
But I do think that anyone proposing student debt cancellation across the board should also look to give tax breaks to those who did pay off their student loans, or maybe like... I don't know how these things work, but it could be like added to their 401k,
like
to their retirement fund,
like a tax return or something like that.
Something like that. Yeah, I mean, I do think that anyone proposing student debt cancellation should also look into this, because we do have these records easily available to us of who took out student loans and when they paid them off, and how their credit was, and how well they were paying it off. Like, so I don't know. As far as I know, and we're very deep in the presidential election cycle right now. So obviously, presidential candidates come to mind.
Who are you voting for, Ali?
No. Let's not put him on the spot like that. We all know this man's a Trump supporter.
Or even worse, a Pete supporter. Are you a Pete supporter?
We kid around, of course. I would like to hear this kind of rhetoric from a presidential candidate, though, and I don't think I have yet. So
The full details in regards to the tax break plan.
absolutely.
I think they do have a plan on how they are going to cancel student debt, but I've never heard anybody speak on how they're going to treat the people who've already paid their student loans off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one of my teachers actually brought this up, the point, and it really got me thinking. So I mean, like, if you want to really analyze the problem of student debt, like, I think it kind of boils down to the fact that there's a few people who own a lot of things, and then they want to profit off of people who don't own too many things, that are kind of more desperate. They're willing to take out loans. Like, like, for example, like, the rich kids that come to school, right? They drive like their Audi R8s and like their Porsche cars and
BMWs, man.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
And like it's like you see them and like you're pretty sure that they don't have to deal with any student because their dad's rich. Like, they don't have to deal with any of that. So these guys are like the people who own these universities and the people who profit off of these people, like, directly. They are the people responsible for all this burden on the shoulders of these students and these graduates.
So I think one of the reasons that people are laughed at for bringing up, okay, what happens to those people who paid off their student loans properly, is just because most of the people bringing up this argument are doing it in bad faith, to be very honest. They don't like the plan as a whole, and so they resort to this kind of comeback. So I can see why people would laugh it off, but I do think it's a legitimate concern that should be addressed, because the system as a whole was pretty unfair to begin with, especially in the last 3-4 decades. It quickly evolved since its beginning into a form of just ripping students off
And profiting. It's a
for-profit
system.
It's very much for profit, obviously. So, like I said, I would like to hear this kind of discussion. And, if the debates were any good, we would hear this kind of discussion, but...
Yeah, but, like, we're like, limited to, like, 30-second to, like, 90-second, like, response and, like, answer clips, which is...
Ibrahim, when are we having a presidential candidate on this podcast?
Ali, when are you announcing your presidential run?
I can,
You have the presidential voice.
I'll
also.
DM Trump on Instagram.
Oh, okay.
See what can happen.
Trump has an Instagram, bro?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he does, right? Or maybe,
I mean,
maybe it's
he's
just
known for his Twitter, though.
Yeah, maybe just his Twitter. Oh, one of the things that we've seen colleges today is like the high salaries that are being paid to college presidents, to the chancellors of systems, and also to college football coaches. like college football coaches, basketball coaches. So you're seeing literally millions of dollars being poured into Division I coaches, assistant coaches, defensive coordinators, basketball coaches, all these different things with these college football programs and basketball programs. Even you see it's a pervasive thing. It even trickles down here in Texas to high school programs. You have stadiums in Texas worth $30, $40, $50 million for high school football. Even if you were to travel,
because they make so much money, right?
Yeah, even within a 30-minute radius.
Yeah.
You could go around. You'd find I know
Wiley
built a $30+ million stadium. Allen's got a $30+ million stadium. Crazy amounts of money that even from like a high school to a college level, like the system is built. It's a massive vacuum of billions and billions of dollars just taking money from people.
Well, when you mentioned high salaries being paid to college coaches, right?
Yes, sir.
What it reminded me of that. Remember those stories that came out last year or was the year before on how parents were bribing colleges to get their students into these, like, that was like one of the funniest stories I've ever heard.
People got indicted for that.
Yeah,
right?
people got jail time. People got a whole 5 days worth of jail time. Can you believe that?
Oh my god.
5 days, bro. I don't know how they survived that, bro. Yeah, so like we see that there's this problem where, like, rich people who have the money, they bribe these guys into, like, through various, like, really underhanded ways. Like, there was one story where, like, one family bought, like, a library for the school, or like they paid extra for, like, they bribed their the like, I don't know, the lacrosse team coach or like a swim team coach
Okay.
It was like weird, and then it got really weird too because they had somebody Photoshop their kids onto like the swim team, so that they could prove that they were on the swim team, and they went through this entire like elaborate process, and like they faked their kids getting into these schools, like these kids have no business being in these schools, like these Ivy League schools and whatnot, and like there's like this whole thing. I don't know. Was it last year? I don't know if you're.
Mm-hmm. It was last year.
It was last year. Okay.
Where you had the what's now infamous of parents essentially paying thousands of dollars just to get their kids into universities like UCLA or Ivy Leagues.
A little bit of a funny story was like when Dr. Dre he posted a picture on Instagram of his daughter, and he was like, "I'm really proud of you. You worked really hard to get into X college." And then he took it down because he remembered he made like a $200,000 or $300,000 donation to the school beforehand.
Oh man.
Yeah. We can talk about student loans and its impact also in another way, which is the racial divide, right? So here's some quick stats. Nearly 85% of black bachelor's degree recipients carry student debt, compared with 69% of white bachelor's degree recipients. The average white student loan borrower owes around $30,000, and the average black borrower owes closer to $34,000. White borrowers pay down their education debt at a rate of 10% a year, compared with 4% for black borrowers. Nearly 38% of all black students who entered college in 2004 had defaulted on their student loans within 12 years. So let's. I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts on this for a second, because, to put it very bluntly, a good demographic of people in this country would probably just say, well, this race is less responsible with their money.
What are you trying to say here? I don't catch your drift.
So you're saying a good demographic of individuals would say that African Americans, to just be frank, are less responsible with their money.
Right.
And that's it. Guys, that's it.
Okay.
I got what I needed.
Just to clarify,
I don't agree with this. Obviously, right?
Of course,
but
of course.
let's talk about.
But that doesn't matter. I already have what I need.
Okay, you got your blackmail, huh? But yeah, sorry, Ali, go ahead.
So when an individual comes out of a college institution, they have a certain amount of debt. They have a specific loan amount. Now you're looking at it from a broader perspective. You're not just looking
exactly
at
what
loans.
I was thinking.
You're looking at the jobs they obtain, the society they live in, where they live, also how much they're paying for rent, where they're paying for food, because how much are they really setting aside a specific amount monthly to pay off the debt plus the interest that comes along with it. Yeah. So it's very interesting because it could be, I'm not saying it is or it's not.
Sure.
It could be that these numbers have nothing to do with each other. Like straight up, it could be that they have nothing to do with each other.
Right, yeah.
A white person, perhaps is able to do it at this rate. An African American is able to do it at this rate. But they both have radically different circumstances.
I disagree. I disagree.
Well, I mean, he's got a point in that correlation does not equal causation necessarily.
But
okay.
What I'm saying is that there is a reason why there's a difference in between these numbers, because the loan system is predatory towards the African American community.
Well, what evidence do you have to make that statement?
What do you mean? What did you say again?
I said, what evidence do you have to make that statement?
Evidence is that we can see, like, especially in the housing market, like, we have people like giving predatory housing loans to these people who are generally who live under the poverty line, and like the people who work hard and get out of there, they'll take any opportunity that's given to them, right? And if they find a predatory loan, with very high interest rates, variable interest rates that they can go up or down according to the economy, sure. And like a bad repayment plan. They'll take anything because you have to go to college, you have to get out of the circumstances that you grew up in, and these these companies that give you loans, that they recognize this as a potential for profit, and they go and they sell these bad loans, these bad student loans to these underprivileged communities, just so that they can make a profit at the end of the day. They don't care whether you're how fast you can repay it or how much you can how much debt you're taking on or any of that. They don't care. They're just trying to make as much money as they can off of you.
Well, I would argue they do that to every student.
They do that to every student, but more so I'd say to African American students and students of color, because
Well, I think that's a pretty big claim.
Well, okay. So I do agree with your point, Ibrahim, but I was also thinking of it from another way. And we can also think of it as that this country has a pretty like racist system about it, right? So the difference between an African American bachelor's degree recipient and a white bachelor's degree recipient in this country is that it is factually easier for a white person to get a job in this country, right? African Americans often need to go through background checks that white people do not. Black people also just have a tougher time in general, because it's a fact that people with more black sounding names are usually rejected from jobs that they're otherwise qualified to do. Furthermore, there's the racial profiling by police in this country is a big problem. I can't remember the stats off the top of my head, but some crazy number of black men have gone to prison in this country. Like, what is it, 40%? Higher than that? I can't remember right now. And so even for a crime that has nothing to do with the job that you're applying for, you are much more likely to be rejected from that job because of a criminal record than if you don't have one.
I mean, go ahead. Yeah.
Doesn't a criminal record suggest like the moral and ethical character of an individual?
No, because the circumstances you grew up in have an impact on the actions that you do and the things that you commit. You know what I'm saying? Like the company that you keep has a major effect on the actions that you do and the things that you do, and the things that you choose to.
It's not just that. I mean, policing in this country is racist as a fact, right?
Just to counter his point that if you have a criminal record, that means it determines a moral.
I'm not saying just because something's on your criminal record, you're like a criminal for life.
Sure.
And I understand. Like, my personal opinion, I perfectly understand that, like, the police system, for the most part, we do have major issues with it. From a racism point of view, we have major issues with it. However, I don't see that necessarily affecting how an individual can pay off their student loans.
Yeah, because, I mean, it does, because the amount of opportunities that you're afforded after you graduate, even if you, let's say, hypothetical, right? Let's say someone goes to jail for a nonviolent drug offense that they commit when they're 17. They get out of jail. Usually that's not the case.
Okay.
Let's say they got out of jail, right? Yeah. And then they're like, okay, let me get my life right. Let me finish high school. Let me start going to college. Yeah. How am I gonna pay for college? I don't have any savings. They'll take out. They'll like be like, okay, I have to get any student loan that's offered to me, right? Because I have to pay for college somehow. Because I want to get out of the situation that I'm in. They'll take a bad loan, right? They'll take a bad loan. They'll get into college. They'll graduate. They'll get their degree. They have $100,000 in student debt. Okay. So now you have to get a job, right? But you have a criminal record.
Yeah.
You have a criminal record. I mean, and you haven't made any criminal records. Never mind. That was a rap lyric. Never mind. So what happens is that no one's gonna give you a job because you have a criminal record, and so you have to settle for a less paying job. You either go back to a 9-to-5 retail job or something, because no one else is going to hire you, because they were going to hire people who are white, you know what I'm saying, or not people who don't have criminal records, and then you just that's probably like the story of the average person who defaults on their student loan. I mean, without the criminal, you know what I'm saying.
I mean, so doesn't that just attest to the difference between an individual with a criminal record and one that does not have a criminal record?
Sure.
Regardless of race.
Okay, but you understand that like criminal records in this country, And I understand you're playing, the contrarian for the most part. I want to you.
No, I want to hear.
I would like to
ideas.
explain, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, black people in this country are much more likely to have a criminal record, and it's not because they indulge in more crimes. It's because they are more they're profiled higher by the police for their crimes, right?
Yeah.
Now, something like what was implemented in New York City and then kind of exported from there to other cities under Bloomberg's mayoralty was stop and frisk, right?
Yeah.
And he's been quoted as saying, you can just take one description of like an African American male and Xerox it, send it to every police precinct in the city and tell them to look out for this kind of individual. And it's a fact that stop and frisk primarily targeted Black and Hispanic people. Black and Hispanic men especially. And then you can also look at other statistics like Black kids and white kids in high school both report roughly equal amount of indulgence in like drugs, in illegal drugs, right? Whether it be marijuana or even harder drugs. But far more Black kids end up going to juvenile detention centers or after they turn 18 going to jail for drug offenses such as carrying or distribution, whatever. Whereas it's obvious that both demographics roughly equally participate in this, but you don't see as many white kids going to juvenile for drug offenses.
I mean, to put it like kind of anecdotally, like, do you think the cops are going to arrest a Black teen with 1 ounce of marijuana, or you think they're going to arrest a white teen wearing like a Patagonia sweatshirt that has like 1 ounce of weed in his back pocket? Like, who do you think is more likely to go to jail and serve time?
I think they'd arrest the white dude because the Black dude would be dead.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point.
That's cold. But it is factors like this that add up and are shown to be prevalent across the country, which makes it tougher for Black people to pay their student loans in the first place. Okay. And then also you can, this is not the season for discussing general difference in racial treatment in this country, but it has
I understand how
it was a little segue
racial,
because we're talking about how the Black and white repayment of student loans differs.
So that definitely leads to a massive effect on like the now $1.6 trillion that we have in national student debt. So there's many factors like we just mentioned. First, obviously, the idea that originally came out in the 60s, and then the failure of that idea that we see in today's society. Racism plays a role. We have massive salaries for college coaches and whatnot.
Yeah.
So it's
this all adds up for sure. And
it's a spider web.
And it's like an inescapable thing, right? If you sign up for student loans and then you declare bankruptcy, right? Like, I declare bankruptcy. Like you can't, if you declare bankruptcy, your student loans don't go away.
Really?
Yeah. It's inescapable. Like you're stuck with it for the rest of your life. And like you're asking a 17, 18-year-old kid to make that decision without knowing what interest rates are, without knowing what's the difference between a variable and a constant fixed rate is, without knowing the repayment structure or anything like that.
You know what's interesting? Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
They don't teach that type of stuff in high school either.
Yeah, they don't. I feel like it's very deliberate though, because they want you to sign on to a bad loan.
No, it's funny. I had a friend in high school whose parents, to escape student debt, they actually renounced their U.S. citizenship, and then they couldn't go back to the U.S. anymore.
If we have a Bloomberg Clinton ticket, I might have to do that. I don't have any student debt.
Time to go. Time to move for sure. A little aside is also that we've even named this entire season $1 trillion problem, right? And like you just mentioned, it's a $1.6 trillion problem. But honestly, it's not even that scary a number if the government just stops giving into corporation demands and especially complete tangent here, but the military industrial complex, right? Because the war in Iraq was like a $3 trillion project. How is there no money left for student debt forgiveness? It just sometimes doesn't add up at all.
I mean, like, to kind of add on to that a little bit, like the Pentagon I forget the exact number, but it was like some number of $1 trillion. It was like maybe $2 or $3 trillion was left unaccounted for, bro. People just didn't know where it went. Like how does that happen? Like how do you just like lose track of $3 trillion? I forget the exact number, but like how do you just lose track of that much money?
Did they look behind their sofa cushions? You know, sometimes I drop some pennies over.
A couple trillion. You know,
couple trillion. Yeah.
It's buried in the back.
Couch, bro.
Whack. So as we can see, student loan is a really big problem, right? And the thing is, like, now I'm gonna go back to what I cut you off for earlier, Adi. But
No worries, man.
but it doesn't even make sense for a lot of people to go to college in the first place, and they only do it because of their culture.
So I think, do you think there's a difference between white culture and brown culture and Desi culture, especially because we have a lot of experience in that? Like, do you think there's a special do you think that parents, like Desi parents, want kids to go to college more often than not, or like is it a requirement? Like, what do you guys think?
We can definitely see the stigma in society.
So Ibrahim, you bring up a lot of great questions that we're definitely going to start answering next week in our second episode of the fourth season, $1 Trillion Problem of the fourth podcast. For our listeners out there, I want to thank you for tuning in to this episode. And you can help us grow by giving us a follow on Instagram at thefourth.productions and Twitter at thefourth_prod. As of now, we hope you have a great rest of your day.